Good evening, everyone. This is Keith David, and you're listening to Without Your Head.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by writer and producer Ashlee Blackwell and director Xavier Burgin of Horror Noire, A History of Black Horror, available now on Shudder, which it's amazing. I watched it twice.
Cool. Well, hey, good to be on here.
Yeah, it's good to have you both here. So
Thank you.
It was originally a book written by Robin R. Means Coleman. So when did you first read it, and when did it first start to talk like we want to make a documentary?
I'll start with that.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to give credit to, she's a scholar. She's located in Brooklyn. She's originally from the Midwest. Her name is Christina Leaf Mallon, and she was doing her master's thesis work on Black women in 70s horror cinema. And when I started to kind of have this idea for the blog that I have, I was just kind of doing research, and I found her. She's one of the first people I found. And in the trailer for her master's research, which is called My Final Girl, she had Robin R. Means Coleman in it, and the wording on the screen was she was the author of this book called Horror Noire, and I was like super stoked to see that someone had actually written an entire history of Black and American horror cinema up to that point, because the book was originally published in 2011, and so I immediately bought it and got it, and this was back in 2013. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean that's how I realized that this book even existed.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask Xavier, had you read the book prior to being involved in the movie?
So, no, I'll be honest, I did not read it prior. What ended up happening with me coming into this is at that point, Stacey Productions with Ashlee and then Shudder had started, getting the ball rolling, and then they reached out to me and asked, hey, do you want to be a part of this? And, when they told me it was about, horror and Black folks, then I was like, absolutely. So once they told me that, and they were like, yo, we want you to actually, pitch for this to, come in and be a part of it, that's when I sat down and I read the book myself.
Mm-hmm. So Shudder was always involved?
No, they weren't always involved. Me and Phil Nobile Jr., who is the editor-in-chief of Fangoria, he started with the idea because he saw how important Get Out, he saw the shockwaves that Get Out was going to continue to make. And so he was in a prime career position at the time to pitch ideas to his company in order to get, the ball rolling on original programming. And so, because we live so close together, he just invited me to lunch one day and we just kind of started talking about the idea. So we had pitched this idea to a couple of places for about a year. So, and it was it was something that we really wanted to do. And one afternoon in Los Angeles, I just kind of said to him, hey, why don't we just try Shudder? And he was like, yeah, he's very casually said, yes, let's pursue that. And we had a friend there, Sam Zimmerman, who was our biggest cheerleader in order to get the ball rolling. And it was, I've said this before, it was literally the day after Jordan Peele won the Oscar where they said, okay, let's do this. And so that's kind of how it got started.
Yeah. Shudder's really becoming a great channel. There's so much great content, their original stuff, and great older stuff.
Absolutely.
So you would say Shudder is very helpful?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, they gave us their blessing. They gave us a budget to shoot and to get everything together. And Xavier did a really awesome job getting a crew and creating the atmosphere for production. It was fantastic.
One of the things I wanted to bring up that I absolutely appreciated from both Shudder and Stage 3 was them saying, we want to champion a young Black director to come in and do this, because they didn't have to make that choice, but they specifically did, which, that's why I was brought into the mix. And, that's something I'm always going to appreciate from both the production team at Stage 3 and then also Shudder as well.
Mm. Well, I was going to say one of the things I liked about it is I like documentaries anyway, but sometimes they can be a little dry. It's just, it's like an interview and a guy sitting there, a girl sitting there, and they're just talking. But it was interesting to watch, and I really liked the pairing of people where they could, it was more like conversation than like a person's being interviewed. Was that one of your ideas to, how to present the documentary?
So the whole thing was Ashlee in it. Oh, go ahead, Ashlee. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Xavier.
Oh yeah. So Ashlee and the team had already been thinking about great stuff like this. So when they brought me the first rendition of the entire pitch book that they had together for this, one of the things they wanted to do was basically see through the eyes of the people who are watching this, and they wanted to have close up on the eyes, have this conversational feel to it, which actually was something that I knew up front that I wanted to be a part of it when they were telling me about this, because one of the beautiful things that Black folks do is that we're in films and we're watching stuff, we love to talk back and forth about it. And what was really brilliant that Ashlee and Daniel thought of was they were putting the touches before I even came into was trying to implement something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it totally works. How did you go about who would pair with who?
So Ashlee, you want to jump in that one?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. It was pure luck. It's the nature of the beast when you're putting a film together. It's about who's available when. It's really we did our best to pair people in the correct way. I know I was a big part of deciding who I would think would be best. It was kind of like Danielle Burrows, who's also she did a lot of the other back end production stuff, and she was coordinating all of the people we were getting for certain days. And it was kind of just like for example, Miguel Nunez and Kelly Jo Minter. I'm like, oh, I was like, okay, they would be probably really good together if, they got along, if their schedules permitted them to be together at the same time, because they're around the same age. They, I had a gut feeling that they kind of swam in the same circles as far as like the gigs that they had. Because I know Kelly Jo Minter, she did horror movies, but she also did House Party. And Miguel Nunez does a lot of, Black films as well. And so I was just wondering, I'm like, I wonder if they know each other. I wonder if they have a good rapport. And just luckily enough, they actually did get along really well, and they were willing to fit with each other. So again, Ken and Keith too, really great guys.
Yeah.
Got along well. So yeah, it was a numbers game. It was who was available when, and also just pure luck that they were able to produce chemistry.
Yeah. Now, for those scenes, would you just ask questions and let them talk, or were you actually really filming, showing stuff on the screen for them to watch and talk about, or kind of a mixture of both, maybe?
So the interesting thing about it is one of the things we did behind the scenes is that of course I was behind the scenes and I was with the cameras and everything, making sure that everything looked good. Ashlee was the one that was specifically interviewing everybody there and going through all the questions because they had set everything up. And then after we got done with the interviews, we had this what is it, Ashlee? Maybe a 20 or 15 to 20 minute clip that we had that was playing. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
So the 20 to 15 minute clip that basically had all of the films that we knew we were going to talk about in the documentary. And once we got done interviewing them, we just asked them to sit down for a second, let's set up the cameras, and let's just allow you guys to see the clips that's going on, and basically kind of let them, just have a conversation with each one that comes up. So that way it just felt natural. And a lot of the times they already knew a lot of the films. So when the ones that came up that they knew, they would just go on and on about it. The ones they may not have known as well, they just go back and forth asking about it. And it just made the atmosphere more conversational.
Mm-hmm. Now, from Ashlee's background, I assume she's been a long time horror fan. Xavier, Xavier, were you a horror movie fan before getting involved?
Well, the whole thing is I grew up on older stuff like Candyman, of course, Event Horizon, seeing that type of stuff, when I was younger. But I admit, I definitely wasn't as into the culture as Ashlee was, by any means. So it was really one of those cases where I'd always known it, always watched this type of stuff, but it really wasn't until I came into filmmaking myself, maybe about a decade ago, and then also seeing that this was something viable that I could be a part of, that I really started going more towards that route. But definitely the team that was there, especially Ashlee and Tanana Reeve and the folks that were behind it, they've been in this and been a part of this much, much longer than I have.
Mm-hmm. So Ashlee, when did you start to get into horror movies? Around what age?
Oh, I was barely out of toddlerhood.
Right.
I started
very similar.
Super early. Yeah. I mean, I've said this before. I always love saying it. I had a very laid back mom growing up, so a single parent home, and she was all about bootlegging HBO horror movies when she could get it, and so we had a library of films to choose from, and she was cool with me just kind of exploring artistic avenues of being exposed to different films and films and music that she was watching, and that she was she was really happy to kind of get me involved in stuff. She would take me to the movie theaters all the time. So I started watching Hellraiser, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. I started watching that stuff early because I was an 80s kid, and I just loved it. I love the monsters, and I love the special effects, but I also loved I loved the final girl trope before I knew what that actually meant. So all these kind of cool things combined, and me just being a weird kid in general, I really was drawn to it. And then as I got older, and I just realized that I knew that I wanted to see more representation of people of color in the genre. So,
similar story there is a single mom, and my brother's 9 years older, so she would take him to the drive-in back in the 80s, and instead of getting a babysitter, just take me along. So I was going to see horror movies since I was like 5 or 6, and oddly enough, the earliest one I remember seeing is Night of the Living Dead, which is obviously a big part of the documentary.
For sure.
Yeah. So, you said when you started to get older, you started to pay attention to how black people were portrayed in the movies. So, what age would you say?
I would say much older. I mean, when I was about 7 or 8, when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and that was the first black nerdy girl I think I saw in a horror movie. So that kind of really made my eyes kind of go huge, because it was just this revelation of oh my God, I can be a part of this genre too. In a sense, I kind of felt that way as a kid. But it was also, but I think I guess for me, taking classes in college and stuff like that, and I was starting to do the interdisciplinary studies, where you can take American studies, you can do liberal arts, you can do women's studies, you can do black studies, and all these kinds of things, and kind of starting to really intellectualize the whole what it really meant to just not only see myself on screen, but also I was seeing characters that were becoming disposable. And I think when I started to realize what I wanted to write about, what really made sense as far as my writing voice was understanding that I wanted to see characters of color that had meaning. It was kind of like what we did in the documentary, right? So we're talking about how society is treating blacks in a sense in some kind of social political error, and also how that's being mirrored in horror films. And I think for me, it was about wanting to. I've always been pushing to see characters, especially in a genre that I love, to be fully fleshed out and be treated be human, have layers and have screen time, significant screen time, and not just be, bodies for the body count. And that's what I want out of the horror genre, even more so. Even though we've gotten it, but it has never been consistent.
Well, when did you start to go back and look at older horror movies, from the blaxploitation era, or even earlier?
When I started Graveyard Shift Sisters back in 2013, so I would say really I'm going to guess, because that's all a blur now, honestly, but I'm guessing 2013 to 2015, I spent a lot of time going back and watching those old movies from the 70s, and even watching the older ones from the 30s and 40s.
Do you think horror, for both of it, do you think horror movies is a good reflection of the social atmosphere of the time they were made?
Xavier, you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 100%, I think they are absolutely. I mean, you can take it all the way back to the 1950s with Birth of a Nation, and how that was a direct reflection of what America was going through and how they were treating black folks and how they viewed us. It was a case of, black people being terrorized in a type of way, and this uplifting of white supremacy of the Ku Klux Klan, and that was, 100% something that was happening right at that moment. I think another good thing to bring up is you take it all the way to the 70s with blaxploitation. Now, I think they brought it up, Ashlee, Tanana Reed, and Robin both brought it up in there, that while it's not a 100% true representation of what's going on, because folks at that point we were pimps and hoes and things like to that degree. But at least you were seeing like some of the things that was going on at that moment and some of the things that folks were dealing with in certain type of films. So I definitely think, throughout the times, like a great example, I think a good example is like Tales from the Hood within the 90s and all of the racial strife that was happening right then. And what Tales from the Hood was trying to do was give some of that restorative justice that we weren't seeing on a regular basis in there. So I definitely think that when you look at the black films, look at the black horror films that are happening throughout these eras, they are very reflective of the times and what's happening at that point.
Mm-hmm. Now, it was interesting in the movie that you start with Birth of a Nation, because I wouldn't think most people consider it a horror movie, but the, especially the black guy's like presented as almost a monster in the movie, or at least something to be feared. And do you remember what you thought when you first watched that movie?
So, for me, the first time that I ever saw that movie was back, in film school. And I remember being like really, really disgusted. Like, why do I need to watch something like this? Because what made me angry was like, folks used to always be like, well, it's a horrible film, but it's also truly innovative and amazing to film and what it pushed. And it's like, as a black person, I don't want to hear that type of shit. All I see is a overtly white supremacist, racist type of film. There's nothing there that I need to learn or be taught about by any means. So honestly, when I first saw it, it disgusted me because it really showed me how America viewed a lot of black folks, like in that time. And in a lot of ways, some of those tropes, many of those tropes that you even see then still come up in the views of black folks. So I just remember the first time seeing it, it was just one of the things where honestly, I wanted to walk out the classroom, but I was like, okay, at least let me force myself to see this one time so I don't need to watch it again.
Mm-hmm. Ashlee, do you remember watching it for the first time?
Yeah, it was same for me. It was film school. I think it was the first year I started. I actually transferred colleges, so for good reason. Because honestly, I mean, yeah, we were watching the film. For the technical innovations of it, but I'm just like, yeah, this is still woefully problematic. And even though the teacher addressed it, she didn't really go into depth. And then when I took a Black American Cinema course, I think it was a Black in Mass Media course at the school I transferred to, that's when we really got into, okay, this is kind of one of the foundations of how, we see Black stereotypes portrayed in the media, specifically film. And so that's the class where we really went into depth about these images that we were seeing. And that was really nice to have to have an unapologetic discussion about what this movie is implying about black people, and not just seeing it from the technical aspect, because I am not a filmmaker. I am more of a cultural critic. So that's what I was more interested in. Yeah.
No, Xavier, you said why do I even have to watch this movie? And I can definitely understand that. Do you think it's still like an important movie for people to watch, even just to see how people used to be portrayed?
I think that it's important. Like the whole thing is, folks love to bring up the technical aspects and all that type of stuff it did. And personally, I don't think that stuff is the most important thing to even be talking about. If you're going to bring up this film, if you're going to bring up Birth of a Nation, then you need to talk about the stereotypes. You need to talk about the domestic terrorism. You need to talk about the Ku Klux Klan. You need to talk about blackface. You need to talk about these terrible implications on black life that were portrayed by folks who didn't understand black people, and how those things are still even perpetuated to this day. For me, the only way Birth of a Nation is important is if you're actually talking about the topics that it perpetuated. If you're only bringing it up to talk about the technical aspects that it revolutionized, or whatever you want to call it, then you're doing a disservice to the folks that you're teaching, and also to the folks that need to understand why, like Hollywood being the cultural exporter, literally everything that we see, Hollywood is the reason why we view this type way. And that is something that's been ingrained all the way back in the 1915s. That film for a long time was how the majority of people, specifically white folks, saw black life. And that's something that needs to be talked about, because we still have that problem to this day.
Mm-hmm. Interesting you bring up blackface, because just recently that's in the news and social media, and I see people, questioning why it's racist and why isn't whiteface racist? And it's really strange to see that like a topic in 2019.
Well, the thing to add about it, and then Ashley, I'll let you take over on this if you want to bring it up, is like I feel like Frederick Douglass in 1889 was bringing up the problems with blackface, like the idea that blackface specifically is this new age problem that's happening right now, that's only becoming a problem now or being talked about, it just isn't true. It's been a problem since its very inception in use. It's just that more often than not in our nation, we don't want to deal with the problems that we've created. So we try to like throw it off as something that's new that maybe we just need more time as a nation to get over. But that's not true. We've been dealing with it since the foundation of this nation. This is something that needs to be talked about and eradicated right now, because it's something that we've had to deal with since, for a very, very long time in our nation. So, yeah.
And because it's not taught, people don't see it as a big deal. We're not living in a time where you have an Al Jolson on television. It's those images aren't so directly on television or in media anymore, and so people think that these conversations are obsolete, and they absolutely aren't, because people aren't necessarily taught history. I will never forget being in college and being in classes, and people are just like, "Why didn't we learn this in high school? Or why didn't we learn this in our more formative years? Because these things are really important, and they reverberate throughout history. And some people don't get these lessons, or some people don't seek out to kind of eradicate their ignorance on these topics, and then it becomes this kind of sweeping judgment where it's like, oh, it's not a big deal, and it actually is, and not understanding that blackface is, that, again, it goes back to birth of a nation. These are the kind of images that make it dangerous for black people to even exist. So, and not understanding that those chain of effects is really dangerous.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the, well, not a lot, but some of the early movies that you go over, I'd never even heard of, like Son of Ingagi. And now, were either of you familiar with some of those movies before you were either reading the book or being part of the documentary?
I definitely was. Yeah. You want to go, Xavier?
Okay. Yeah, and for me, like, for example, like, I knew of Our Skinny Show and Spencer Williams because, like, I had heard about them in classes, like, every once in a while. But, like, honestly, like, even hearing about Ingagi or Son of Ingagi was something that I specifically learned from reading the book and being a part of the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
I know about Son of Ingagi. We even live tweeted it on Twitter a couple of years ago. So yeah, I know a lot about this film. I guess because I co-wrote it, so I actually kind of helping put together what might be best, and also kind of just, especially asking Dr. Coleman, just kind of really just mining her brain for everything that she kind of remembers from the book, or the highlights of the research that she did and what she was really passionate about talking about, and especially Tanana Reeve, who was teaching a course on Black horror, so she has a wealth of knowledge about this too. So just talking to them about these older films really helped give context for, again, where Black horror has been in the past, and as we move, as we kind of move towards the decades following.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's mentioned in the documentary about, Night of the Living Dead, the lead, it wasn't written to be a black character. He just happened to be the best actor. And I always think that makes the movie, that character specifically, makes it more powerful. And also, I don't think it dates the movie because they're not even really necessarily bringing attention to it while you're watching it. How do you feel about that? Let me start with Ashlee.
How do I feel about Night of the Living Dead, just in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking, I kind of was thinking about, yeah, you're right. I think I could kind of see this movie being shown today. Like it's to me, it's timeless. I don't remember when I first saw it, but I do. But what I always love doing is I love hearing from people who were literally there in 1968, who went to the theaters and went in droves. I love talking to older my Black elders, because especially the ones who love pop culture and who love film, because they'll talk about the experience of, like, you know, Black audiences went in droves to see this movie because it was so revolutionary to see a Black leading character be so bold in this movie. And what Tananari says, which I found audience was laughing at now, is that, you know, he's beating up white people and he's beating up white zombies. And again, this was completely unheard of up to that time. So I think that's why it was so groundbreaking to see such a character be so bold. And also kind of the turning point is, you know, again, I think for the time it was also unfortunately very typical and very expected to kind of see him be gunned down at the end. So I think for me, those images, that Night of the Living Dead is a landmark for a reason, and I think it's a landmark for a reason is because it kind of set a template for Black horror from there on, and I think that's why I love how horror noir, how we were able to frame it. It was to see Jordan Peele's influence with Get Out, because again, it's decades on, this has kind of been a thing. It's kind of been this blueprint in a sense, and to switch it up now in this day and age, again, this is another milestone that's happening now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is one of the most influential horror movies for, like, many reasons. But, you know, zombies, and then the Black lead, and how he's portrayed, and just, you know, so many things about it. Even just being a small budget movie and doing so well. It's weird that zombies have become so mainstream, because I remember when I hosted a Dawn of the Dead panel years ago, and Ken Faree said when he did it, it ruined his career, and even some of his friends wouldn't talk to him because it was like a step up from like pornography. He said at the time, you know, this really dark horror movie, and then, you know, today you can buy kids T-shirts with zombies on them. It's, you know, totally different.
That's so true. So my biggest theory on that is that because the fans of those movies became the creators, they became the people who got the clout, and, you know, pretty much the torch is passed on to them, and so they're able to get opportunities to put zombies on television now. Like, you know, The Walking Dead was one of the biggest television. I don't think it's as big as it used to be, obviously. I think it was one of the biggest television shows out there for a long time. And again, it's one of those examples of how zombies have reverberated, and now you have a whole new generation of kids seeking zombies and watching Night of the Living Dead now, watching Dawn and watching Day, and, you know, so it started something. It started something special. And again, I really love that now fans are becoming the creators. We're becoming the people who are making the moves, and I love that.
Yeah. And along those lines, Xavier, you said you weren't necessarily like a big horror movie fan, but what were the movies that made you want to become a movie maker?
So one of the interesting things is, like, the stuff I remember watching back when I was younger was, you know, a whole bunch of the Spike Lee films. Like, you know, that's something that I was going to see in my house regardless, because, you know, my folks, you know, really, really loved it. And the whole thing is, like, you know, one of the things and the reason why I do love horror and things like that is I also grew up on, like, other stuff like, you know, anime, Dragon Ball Super, Akira, Dragon Ball Z, things to that degree that really wanted me to go in and say, like, I want to get my voice out as a filmmaker. And the whole thing is, like, you know, what really resonated with me on a bigger level was the fact that I wanted to, like, see Black folks in the type of spaces that we usually didn't get to see ourselves in. So it's like, you know, a lot of times you'll see Black folks in comedy or drama, and that's it. But it's like, I want to see us fighting off zombies. I want to see us in space. I want to see us on a sci-fi Mars, like, you know, out, you know, far, far away in the galaxy. Those were the type of things that, like, you know, I really wanted to, like, feel and see on a regular basis. And that's what kind of pushed me to, like, go out and say, I want to get my voice out there. And those are the type of things that I want to make on a regular basis because, you know, as a kid, I'm watching something like anime, like Dragon Ball Z. And even though it's great, I wish I could see a black person in there that looks like me beating up the bad guys. And that's something that I knew that hopefully as I got older, I could actually put out there.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Get Out a few times. First of all, was Jordan Peele, was he easy to get involved in horror noir?
Yes, with a lot of just I think it was just scheduling was probably the biggest hurdle, and it was a very smooth kind of interaction. It was just getting a hold of his assistant. His assistant passed on the idea to him, and I believe he was filming us during the time. We're doing something involving us, so there was a lot of him traveling. So we were fortunate to get to Monkey Paw and get him for a few hours, and we're able to shoot his interview. I mean, it was a lot of back and forth, but it worked out really, really well. And I think the bottom line is, his interest in doing the project was all that mattered. We just had to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. And Get Out itself, because I mentioned earlier about now horror movies more mainstream than they used to be, and so that also helped Get Out because it was up for Academy Awards, and I know a lot of horror fans themselves are like, hey, this is a horror movie that's getting recognition. But how did the movie itself impact you when you saw Get Out for the first time?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me and what was so big about it, or really pushed me, is that as a filmmaker, going to USC, learning all my type of stuff through the film school, a lot of times horror wasn't even really put out there as something that you could do or would be viable in general. So when it's not even set up as viable on a bigger level, as for me as a black person, damn, should I even be dealing with this or thinking about this and going that route? Because will I be able to make my career in this type of stuff? So, when Get Out came out, and not only is it a black main character, but what I think was huge for me is that this was a film that did amazing, and it specifically dealt with racial issues that weren't super subtle, that weren't just off to the side. It was very in your face. It was a racially based horror film, and that was something that for me as a filmmaker, I thought was completely off limits, because most folks would be absolutely scared to make something like that. And to see it soar in that type of way kind of made me feel like that maybe the type of work that I want to do that deals with my race, that deals with my blackness, is something that folks aren't going to run away from when I put that on the table. So that's what really stood out to me more than anything else. It made me feel like I didn't have to be scared about the type of creativity that I wanted to put out into the world.
Mm-hmm. Ashlee, what did you think of the movie when it first came out?
Yeah, I was pretty blown away by how overtly he was able to express racial microaggressions and put it into the context of horror, because I love being black, but it is a chore sometimes, and it is a chore because the emotional expression or catharsis that you need in order to feel like a fully functioning human being, it is maddening. It is horrific within itself, kind of grappling with dealing with race and racism on a daily basis, almost every second of every day of your life, and also diving into these other deeper themes of space. I'm getting too deep here, but I loved all of the themes he was kind of playing with. I honestly still have a hard time expressing how I feel about the film. I know I loved it, but it's just so it's so layered, and it's so brilliant that I can still watch it to this day and still get a lot out of it. Still, I love the fact that, this is a film that's directly dealing with race, and again, he's kind of subverting. He's subverting these tropes about who is the hero, and also, again, not making any white saviors as well. It's really, This is why I didn't say much in the film about Get Out. I'm just like, what else could I possibly say that everyone else has not said brilliantly? Because I just don't have it. It's really hard for me to say more beyond I loved it.
Yeah. And, well, how do you guys both feel about the ending? Do you think they picked the right ending?
Oh, 100%. They really, really did. Like, I'm so happy that our character didn't get gunned down. He didn't get, he didn't go to jail. He didn't have anything bad happen to him at the end, because it's like, and we bring it up in the film, like, we've seen that all the time. We've seen black folks in jail. We've seen all of those sad endings. Like, it was great to see a character that looked like us, that understood what we go through, actually triumph in the end. I don't think the film would have been as impactful and as strong and as culturally relevant if he had a chosen ending that wasn't like this, or if his ending had been more, quote unquote, realistic or bleaker.
Ashley, do you have an opinion on the end? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm also kind of piggybacking on an opinion that Dr. Coleman had about Get Out. What I loved about it was the communal aspect. I think clearly every little minute thing in this film was intentional, but having Lil Rel Howery as Rod be in this film was so imperative to the film. He was not only like the chorus, but he was also his character was also the symbol of this ideal of a black community, and and aspiring to have a healthy black community, of looking out for each other and taking each other seriously. Like I said, it kind of comes full circle when we talk about racial microaggressions. We can talk to each other about these things because we know them, we experience them, and we don't have to say more than really 2 words about them, because we as black people have experienced them. So when Rod takes very seriously what's going on, and to the very end, so to see him come out of that car, that was it wasn't just about Chris being the hero, but it was about the community that was backing him. It was about, like, maybe this is something we need to aspire to even more so. Maybe we need to really pay attention to the fact that, like, being a black community and being united and being supportive of each other is very critical to our survival, and that's what I loved about the ending.
Mm-hmm. What kind of feedback have you both gotten for horror noir?
So it's been here's the crazy thing. The best feedback, or the most critical thing we've gotten, is that folks wished it was longer. That's the biggest criticism that we've gotten, that they wish that this had gone on more, there was more to talk about or more to get into, because, folks for the most part have been wanting to just get more into, this specific type of understanding and, what we're speaking about. So honestly, that's been the biggest criticism that I've seen, that we didn't give enough folks, give folks enough, which, within itself, that's almost like a good constructive criticism. That's what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot better than, man, I wish this would have ended a lot sooner. You don't want to hear that.
Right.
Yeah. How about you, Ashley? What kind of feedback do you think, what kind of feedback have you gotten from the movie?
It's the same. I've been monitoring. I think we've all been obsessively, all of us cast and crew have been obsessively looking at all of the feedback that we've been getting about it, and it's definitely been that they wish it was longer, and also that we wish we expanded more in certain spaces or mentioned certain films. But yeah, it's the nature of the beast is, like, some films just didn't come up. Like, as far as during the interview process, it was me a lot of times throwing talking points at them, kind of chronologically, to kind of gauge what they were immersed in with a particular era, like the 60s, 70s, 80s, and so forth. And so, yeah, I mean, Phil's original idea was for this to be a 4-part series. God help us if it was. I mean, it would be more fulfilling, but we'd probably still be working on it.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, I would love to kind of expand this if possible. And, I do it. Why not?
Yeah. Do you have more footage? Like, how much footage do you have to edit it down to like 90 minutes?
More than 12 hours, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Oh. Are there plans to put out like a Blu-ray or DVD release?
That is a Shudder decision. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Xavier.
I was going to say the exact thing she said. That's really up to Shudder right now.
Yeah. It's an interesting time with like so many things, streaming on different sites, and what happens to like to the physical media. Is it released or is it just always there digitally? And what do you think about that? Do you have a thought on that? On like people, because some people say like physical media is going to go away completely, and I know even like Best Buy doesn't sell CDs anymore. You can't buy like music CDs there. And do you think there'll always be physical media?
I think that, at least for another 1 or 2, maybe 3 generations, we'll still, maybe just 1 or 2, but we'll still have physical media, because there's always going to be those folks who are going to want to have something in their hand. It's the same reason why, even though we got Kindles, we still have books, and folks still want something physical in that way. But I definitely think that the industry in general is going more towards streaming. It's going more towards digital in general, just because of the fact that not as many people are really hitting the theaters like they used to. Like the Blockbuster isn't what it was 10 or 20 years ago. Just having one big name like a Tom Cruise or Will Smith is enough to get folks in seats. So, and the whole thing about it is a lot of times folks have kind of realized, it's a lot more fun to just sit in my bed and watch these films versus, having to go out there, pay the money, pay for popcorn and all that type of stuff. So I definitely think that in general, we're going to see more films being on streaming, being online, coming out there first, and it's really more of the old vanguard that's more so fighting to keep the cinema experience, which, we should still have that. It's still something that folks should be able to enjoy, but it's never going to be as big as it was 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's just not the type of economy and market we're in right now when it comes to films, and that's not where films are going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with everything Xavier's saying, and also just as a consumer, it's a lot more convenient when you can just wait maybe 2 months in order to see that film you really want to see. I am the kind of person, if I haven't seen a movie 1,000 times, I don't want you talking during the theater. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't like about the nature of the public going to a theater, which is why I will see a matinee or I'll go in the middle of the week if I go at all, because sometimes it's about convenience now with streaming platforms, and thinking about where we are in this time, especially with cell phones now. People want to be on their cell phones in the theater. It's distracting. So there's technology on top of technology kind of dampers sometimes the theater experience, is why sometimes are people more reluctant to go. And also I think I'm going to be hopeful and say that there's always going to be film buffs, and film buffs like me who are always going to want physical media, who are always going to go to Criterion, Shout Factory, Vinegar Syndrome, and get those Blu-rays, because we want those Blu-rays so bad. So I think there's always going to be people like me, a big enough market, who are always going to buy physical media.
Yeah. I say that with a giant stack of DVDs and Blu-rays here. Right past my head. It's very large. So yeah, I agree with that. I also do enjoy going to see the movie at a theater, even if it's the one I've seen a lot of times in Boston. Lucky to have some ones that will show old movies at midnight. And for me, there's no. I mean, I like to watch stuff on my computer at home too. But kind of I just like movies, I guess. So I was happy to have to see William Crane in Horror Noire. Big fan of Blackula. And when did you discover blaxploitation movies and start to watch them, as a genre? We'll start with Ashlee.
Okay. Oh, start with me? Okay.
That's all right. I know sometimes it's just hard with multiple people. Sure.
For me, I discovered the horror subgenre of blaxploitation before blaxploitation in general. Because I was more into horror first, so I discovered that first. And again, that was around. It was later. It was around 2013, in 2013 and 2015. Of course, because having a mom who's such a huge film buff, she saw everything, and so again, I loved hearing her conversations about blaxploitation films. So she would talk about them, so I would listen and just kind of get the feel of the nature of like what those films were and what they entailed. So I was watching them. Some are a bit antiquated for me. Like I like obviously I like more of the horror ones than the more general ones.
Right.
But yeah, I was gonna say something else, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah, I mean, just one little like side note, like when we were kind of in the editing process, and we were trying to think of other blaxploitation titles and themes. I literally texted my mom and I was just like, "Can you give me some themes as far as blaxploitation at X, Y, and Z?" She was helping. She was like throwing names at me so I could help. So she was definitely a part of the editing process too. But yeah.
Yeah. The Thing with Two Heads could have made it, I guess.
I think we had. I don't think it made the cut. I could have sworn we were working on that.
But there is a big difference in quality in a lot, because like Blackula I think is like, generally a very good movie, and then Blackenstein is a very not good movie. So it's not like they're all equal. Or just like any kind of genre though. There's some very good movies, and so ones that aren't particularly great. The funniest thing I think though about Blackenstein is the beginning, because it says Blackenstein, and then underneath is the Black Frankenstein, like in case you didn't understand the title. Xavier, was that anything like that you would watch before doing the documentary?
So the whole thing is like I saw like older stuff, like seeing Shaft, seeing Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, seeing Kofi. Like, the whole thing is, since I was in film school, there's definitely some ones like that, Cleopatra Jones, Dolomite, Superfly, that I had seen because I was just kind of reaching out for them, especially when I was trying to figure out, like, what's some older stuff that I can kind of take certain things from to bring into my own films. But it was one of those things where I was like, I enjoyed some of them, but at the same time, I was like, damn, why is everybody, pimps and stuff like that on a regular basis in these type of films? So it was a case of like, I appreciated it for what it was. I was happy to see my face in it, but at the same time, it was never just really my favorite type of work in general, just because it really didn't speak to me in the same way like the films and stuff in the 90s did.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned earlier about maybe expanding on this, is that anything you've talked with Shudder about, either doing a sequel or a series?
I will not comment on that.
All right, fair enough. Well, I definitely like to see some of it. Yeah. So, while it's not I don't even know what genre the same movie is, but do you either have your opinion on the movie Sorry to Bother You? It's got a lot of horror elements. I thought it was like one of the best movies of last year.
Yeah, I saw it. I really, really, really loved it. I mean, just specifically because of the fact that Bruce Riley is such a revolutionary socialist type minded filmmaker. So much of his ideals and what he believes in drips into the film. Like, you can't, who he is and what that film is one and the same. And because of that, it's just a wild ass ride that you're not expecting. And I just really, really loved it. Honestly, I think it should be one of the films that should be Oscar nominated right now, but it is.
I agree. Yeah. Ashlee, you have any thoughts on it?
No, you don't want to hear my thoughts on Sorry About You.
Right, fair enough. I was glad that you guys said The Girl with All the Gifts mentioned in Horror Noire, because that was another movie I thought was great, and it's underappreciated. I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it.
Yeah, I don't know why people don't talk about it a lot. I first saw it at Fantastic Fest in 2016. I was hyped for that one because you had this little black girl centered around this zombie narrative, and so I really loved it. And again, it took a few watches for me to really grasp what was going on. I mean, I understood it because I think I wrote a review soon after I saw it for the first time. Again, one of the things I love about film is that we're having these like conversations about it. Like, it's all kind of like it's circling and it's expanding, and more people are kind of jumping in with their perspectives. And so I love that we were able to incorporate that in the film. and that, people had some really great, intelligent things to say about it. Tananarive, Rachel True, and also Ernest Dickinson kind of coming into that fold and kind of talking about the film. I thought it was great because, Tananarive, I think, made the point. It is 100% true. I mean, she, again, it kind of what Get Out did is subvert this trope that we've seen throughout the decades. It doesn't fall into that trap. It does something very revolutionary, and that's astounding.
Mm-hmm. Xavier, was that a movie you're familiar with before doing horror noir?
I'm sorry. Say the name one more time. I blanked.
No, it's no problem. The Girl with All the Gifts.
So yeah, that was something that I had seen before, and I was like, okay, this is on point. Like, I really, really enjoyed this a lot, and I did notice it didn't really get the love that I think it deserved. But I mean, what kind of like jumped me into it and be like, okay, I got to check this out, was that I was seeing something that was post-apocalyptic, that dealt with like zombies and like in a different way, but also again had a black person in it that was the lead. So that made me be like, okay, let me take out the time to watch this on my own, because even when I was in film school and folks, people and stuff like that, nobody wasn't really talking about it. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I liked it. I had heard about it before, but it was kind of nice when I saw horror noir specifically, like everybody talking about it within the team, just because it was something that I enjoyed, but I wasn't sure if that many folks even knew about it in the first place.
Yeah, it's hard to do an original take on a zombie movie, I think, because they've done so many different things with it, but it was one of the more original zombie movies I've ever seen. Really, really dug it. So where can you follow horror noir? Like, if you want to find out more information.
So it's actually pretty simple. So on Facebook, it's literally just the name Horror Noir. You can find it automatically. On Twitter, it's Horror Noir Film. And then on Instagram, it's the same thing, Horror Noir Film. So if you follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, you're going to end up getting all of the same information. So either one, like, follow all three of them. But, of course, you just choose one, whichever social media you like the most.
Right. And Ashlee, can you tell us a little bit about Graveyard Shift Sisters?
Sure. It's a blog that's about 5+ years going now. It's an entire digital resource that's been documenting Black women and women of color in the horror genre, and that's film, television, comic books, and also fiction writers. There's also a Tumblr page that's a massive archive of just Black women in the horror, film, and television. That, if everyone says, oh, there's no Black women in these films, I literally have scanned hundreds and hundreds of women who have been in horror films, minor roles, major roles, what have you. And so that's basically what it is. And it kind of evolved over the years. Obviously, it is a community first of Black women creators who are interested in the horror genre, but it's also a building scholarship on Black women who have been a part of the horror genre in the past, present, and the people I'm looking forward to working with in the future.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any projects in the works, Xavier?
So yeah, I've got a couple of things that I'm putting out there. So essentially, like, I have a small indie drama on time that, like, I'm pitching around to folks because it's specifically something that I made to work in anywhere from the $500K to under $1 million budget, and I really am trying to push that out there. Another thing that I'm specifically working on is an animated show that deals with a post-apocalyptic world that's based on Black internet culture. It's called Sankova. We've gone out to a couple of folks now, so we're just looking for a showrunner that will be interested in coming on to something like this. And then on the flip side, what I'm really pushing for now is, after doing horror noir, I've had some really great meetings, and essentially I'm just letting horror fans know out there that if you have a horror film, it deals with Black folks, reach out to me, because I'm looking for those type of scripts that, like, I can bring to the people who are interested in what I'm doing next as well.
Mm-hmm. How would they reach out to you? How's the best way to contact you?
So on social media, on Twitter, they can find me at XLNB. On Instagram, it's XLNB Stories. And then the easiest way is I have an email that's open to the public. Literally anyone can hit me up if they want to hit me up. And it's XLNBTwitter@gmail.com. And if they have a horror feature, horror feature script, and they feel strong about it, it deals with Black folks and/or it deals with POC. I want horror fans, folks who are interested in this genre, to reach out to me and send me their work.
Very cool. And Ashlee, I know before this you weren't someone who worked in movies, but after horror noir, do you have any interest in pursuing something else within movies?
I'm interested in working behind the scenes when and if opportunities arise. I'm still a writer at heart, so getting back to that, I'm really antsy about doing that, and hopefully I'm continuing to be a writer and an educator. But again, if I have an opportunity to do more in this field behind the scenes, then I'm more than happy to.
Cool. And do you have a social media or anything for people to follow you specifically?
I'm mostly just on Twitter. You can find me at Graveyard Sister there, and that's kind of a one for all there.
All right, cool. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming on. I loved Horror Noir, and I hope everyone who's seen it digs it, and I hope people who haven't seen it check it out.
Thank you.
All right. Great. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks.
Hey, this is Marlon Taylor, the young Mike Hanlon from Stephen King's It, and you are listening to Without Your Head.